Hello, this is Lubna Abdالتواب Yusuf again, and this is our final lecture in our 1303 class on writing. This lecture is about writing on teachers. I try to choose general topics that students are interested in and that will help the student write about their own personal experiences. So our previous lecture was on friendship, and this one is about teachers. Now, as usual, we're going to have a table of contents that introduces what we're going to deal with. So, definitions. Some can say that teaching is a job, but my definition would be that teaching is a mission, not a job. So, what is your definition of teaching? How many teachers did you meet in your life? Does a teacher have to be one that you meet in a classroom, or can you learn from a teacher on television, on YouTube, on other social media? Can you learn from a teacher who has written a book, for example? So what does the word mission mean? Okay, teaching is a mission. التدريس رسالة مش وظيفة. Now, I have a few quotes and a few questions about teaching, and then a few topic sentences, developing ideas, and a sample paragraph. All right? So let's move to steps in defining a teacher. What is the role of a teacher? What is a teacher supposed to do? How can a teacher affect the life of a human being? Can a teacher change the life of a human being? And then you will identify a specific teacher who played a significant role in your life, and then you're going to introduce your reader to why this teacher played a significant role in your life, and you're going to give evidence and support. Now, I have a couple of quotations for you. Ben Franklin said, "Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I remember. Involve me and I learn." Now, these are three different ways of teaching, three different methods of teaching. Now, if a teacher tells, all right, if a teacher stands and starts giving a lecture and gives the students a lot of information, they will forget most of this information. And therefore, in this case, the teacher will have not done the work well. But then a teacher is supposed to help the students to remember what the teacher wants to teach. All right? Now, the role of memory, but also the way the teacher teaches. Now, the third stage that Ben Franklin introduces is involve me and I learn. All right? So a student has to be involved in what the teacher is teaching, meaning the teacher has to show the students and have the students interact and introduce experiences from the life of the teacher and from the life of the students, so that the students will understand what the teacher wants to convey, and with this understanding, the student will be able to remember. Now, another quotation is by William Arthur Ward, and this is an excellent quotation. He divides, or he classifies, teaching into 4 kinds. He introduces 4 kinds of teachers: the mediocre teacher, the good teacher, the superior teacher, and the great teacher. So what does he say about each? He has 4 sentences. The mediocre teacher tells. So if we go back to Ben Franklin, if the teacher tells, you will forget what the teacher tells you. All right. So in that case, the teacher is mediocre. All right. Second rate. The teacher is not a good teacher. The good teacher explains. All right. So yes, a teacher has to explain. All right. And that is good. But there is better than that. There is a superior teacher. So a superior teacher demonstrates. So for example, if you're teaching children about nature, all right, the teacher can go out to the garden, the teacher can compare plants, the teacher can compare between the garden and the desert, all right? And so in that case, the teacher is a superior teacher because the teacher demonstrates, all right, and shows the student, and therefore the students will remember. Now, the great teacher, all right, and that is from William Arthur Ward's point of view, the best, is the one who inspires the student to want to learn, to want to explore, to want to discover, okay? Now, in this quotation, William Arthur Ward has classified teachers into 4 different categories according to the way they teach, all right? Through this classification, he has classified students as well, all right? So there are mediocre students, there are good students, there are inspired students, and there are inspiring students, all right? So what am I doing with this quotation? I am analyzing it, and I am looking at different ways of reading this quotation. Now, there are many questions one can ask in order to write about a teacher, all right? In order to think about a teacher. What are the qualities of a good teacher, all right? So on a piece of paper, sit and write, what are the qualities of a good teacher? How many methods of teaching are used in the classroom, all right? So there's telling, there's explaining, there is demonstrating, but then there is also the method, the technique that is very popular in the world today. And I'm going to ask you a question. Should the class be based on the teacher, or should the class be based on the student? Should it be a teacher-student technique of teaching, or a student-centered technique of teaching? What is the difference, all right? Now, the difference is clearly the difference between a student who tells, a teacher who tells, all right? The teacher stands and starts telling the students, this number 1, number 2, number 10, number 15. Of course, a student will not remember 15 points. But the student-centered technique is when the teacher starts asking the students questions that lead the students to think of the answers and come up with the answers themselves. So this is not a teacher-centered technique, but a student-centered technique. Focusing on the student, asking the student questions, and trying to get the student to find answers to these questions. Which method is the best and why? All right, which method of teaching? The teacher-centered technique or the student-centered technique? Now, what is the role of the teacher and what is the role of a student in the class? Should the student be a spectator, all right, as if he's watching a television and the teacher is the television, speaking, speaking, speaking? Or should there be interaction between the teacher and the student? What is inspiration? Why is inspiration better than telling, explaining, and demonstrating? This is what we're going to discuss in the rest of the lecture. Is the teacher the most important factor in the educational process? All right. I definitely say no. The student is the most important factor in the educational process. The teacher is a guide, and the student has to learn how to learn. Now, how far is the teacher responsible for the success of the learning process? So if a student fails, is the teacher responsible? Of course not, all right? The teacher shares the responsibility with the students and with the parents. Now, as a student, was your work or was your essay mediocre, good, superior, or inspired and inspiring? All right. So here are 4 different classifications. When you write an essay in an exam, or when you write a paragraph in the exam, is this paragraph mediocre, like any other paragraph anybody else would write? Or is it good? Or is it superior? Or is it inspired and inspiring? Now, here are some brainstorming points, all right? So when we talk about a teacher, we're talking about someone who deals with children, with youth, with adults, all right, with all stages of life. And therefore, they can be extremely effective and can have a role in developing a nation, in building a nation, in the progress of a nation. Now, one extremely important point that I would like to stress, and that is the role of the teacher is not to make studying easier for the student, all right? As a teacher, I am not supposed to make studying easier for you. I am supposed to show you how to study, all right? But in the end, if you don't study, hard luck, you will not improve. So making a subject easier for the student to understand is not the role of the teacher. The teacher is supposed to help and guide the student to learn. The teacher will simply explain. The teacher who simply explains can be good for little children, all right? But if at university I simply explain and I don't inspire you and I don't ask you questions that lead you to think and I don't help you to compare, all right, I will not have achieved the purpose of teaching. The teacher who inspires leaves a mark on the student. So the role of the teacher is to leave a mark on the student, to get the students to desire to learn. Now, there are 2 kinds of teachers. Typical teachers, all right, conservative teachers, teachers who stand and give a lecture, and old-fashioned teachers, okay, who believe that they have all the knowledge in the world and they're throwing this knowledge in the minds of the students as if the mind of the student is empty and the teacher is filling the mind of the student. It doesn't work that way. This is not a good way of teaching because this information will not be remembered, all right? You need to help the students with ideas that they will remember and to learn how to teach, to learn how to learn on their own. Now, more brainstorming suggestions. Some teachers believe that they have all the knowledge in the world. Of course, nobody has all the knowledge in the world. As a teacher, I have knowledge about my specialization, and other teachers have knowledge about their specialization. And as a teacher, one has to understand that teachers have to learn all the time with their students as well. Now, teaching has to be a mission, all right? Meaning the teacher has to feel that he has a responsibility, all right? That he has a message to deliver to the student. And the student has to understand the message in order to be able to apply it. Now, hello again. I had a technical problem, but I solved it, alhamdulillah. And so we are back to the brainstorming slide that introduces the idea that teaching is a mission, and that the idea of education is, it is a process. مراحل. عملية التعلم بتمر في مراحل. والمراحل دي علشان نخلق بني آدم ناجح. All right? So how do we create a successful individual, and what is the role of the teacher in playing a contribution, in having a contribution in this process? Now, from my point of view, teachers are the essence of development and progress, because they create specialists in every field, in the field of agriculture, medicine, engineering, languages, etc. Teachers are the key to the success of the educational process. So if the teacher tells, the student will think that this is the best way to educate students. But no. Students have a mind, and they understand eventually, and they compare teachers with one another, and they like some teachers and they dislike others. Now, good governments ought to devote attention to these nation builders. So teachers are nation builders. Attention in this implies allowing teachers to lead a decent life through getting good salaries. This is an issue that has been discussed over and over and over again. Now, mediocre teachers do not affect students. Why? Because their class is boring, all right? And when the child is bored, the child does not learn. Mediocre teachers are not skillful, and they don't really care for the student, but they only care for the salary at the end of the month, all right? They don't really care whether the student understood the lesson or not. They only want to convey information, and they think this is enough. They do not interact with the students, and this is a big problem. Now, when we start looking at suggestions for a good teacher, all right, we have introduced possible topic sentences, all right? And then we're going to introduce concluding sentences, all right? The best teacher is the one who creates the right kind of atmosphere that allows the students to share ideas and is therefore responsible for the success of the learning process. Now, we all know that Egyptian classrooms are very crowded with students, but it is the role of the teacher to be clever enough to catch the attention of the students through telling stories, through singing songs, through using the internet, through using activities, all right? So the class atmosphere will be one in which the student is happy and is eager to interact with the teacher and interact with the students. Now, if we have a teacher who keeps shouting all the time, who is angry all the time in the classroom, the students will not have the right kind of atmosphere to learn. Now, what the teacher ought to do is to teach the students how to learn, how to observe the world around them, how to observe themselves as they learn, how to observe one another, how to watch a film and look at the aspects of the film, how to listen to a story, how to tell a story, how to sing a song together, all right? So here is a beautiful metaphor, a beautiful image. The teacher in this case is the leader of an orchestra, all right? So the students in the classroom are like the members of an orchestra playing different musical instruments in order to produce a good song. So the role of the teacher is to build the student's mind, to face the world, not simply to succeed in an exam, all right? Now, we are seeing today with the problems that the world is facing, that we cannot have traditional exams anymore. We need to teach the students to conduct research in order to be able to be creative, in order to learn to study on their own, in order to use the internet, and in order to succeed in new ways. And in this case, learning is student-centered, not teacher-centered. The teacher guides the student, and it is the student who carries out the research. Now, the great and inspiring teacher helps the student to contribute to society. Now, if a student learns to conduct research, the student will choose the area that he or she is interested in, all right? So some students are interested in history, some in geography, some in science, some in biology. And so each student will read about the subject that he is interested in and can learn from it, and in the future contribute to this field of knowledge. Now, we have a sample paragraph here in response to the quotation that we looked at the beginning of the class. The mediocre teacher tells, the good teacher explains, the superior teacher demonstrates, and the great teacher inspires. This is a quotation by William Arthur Ward. So we're going to see what we're going to do with this quotation. Ward makes 4 claims, all right? So he has 4 different points of view about different kinds of teachers. The first is that the mediocre teacher tells. Telling simply means to transfer information to the student. Now, this information the student can find in any book or on the internet or in any encyclopedia, all right? So telling the student basic information is not really valuable. In this case, the teacher does not only love this job, no, I'm sorry. In this case, the teacher does not really love this job and does not seem to develop, all right? So the teacher herself or himself, as they are teaching, they need to develop. They need to see how different subjects are taught in the world, all right, in order to have new ways of introducing knowledge to students. But if the teacher does not develop himself or herself, the teacher will be extremely boring and the students will not learn. Now, if the teacher does not really care whether the student understands or not, the teacher in this case has not done a good job. Now, a teacher who tells is like a radio or a recorder, all right? When you turn the radio on or when you turn the recorder on, your mind will not concentrate all the time with what the radio is saying or what the recorder is saying, all right? So in this case, if the teacher forces the student to learn by heart what the teacher says, the student will take the exam, possibly succeed in the exam, and then forget about what the teacher has taught him. This method of teaching, this way of teaching, of telling, will not trigger the intelligence of the students. It means it will not make the students intelligent, all right? To make the students intelligent, you have to challenge them to think, all right, about what they're seeing, about the world, about themselves, about others. Now, you do not want the student to be a passive recipient. A passive recipient means not to think about what they are told, all right? You want the student to think about what they are told and to either agree with it or not agree in order to remember what the teacher taught him. You don't want to give the student a piece of information that they will forget easily. Now, the second claim that Ward makes is the good teacher explains. Now, this kind of teacher takes the content a step further, all right? So the teacher does not only tell, but this teacher is better than the first one because he or she explains the lesson, all right? So the explanation means this is a description, a clarification, an elucidation of what is being taught, all right? So when a teacher explains, this gives the student a better chance to understand what the teacher is saying. Now, some aspects of the explanation might be remembered, all right, because the teacher will make them clearer, but some aspects will be forgotten. So the teacher has to make an effort in the explanation so that the student will remember the details and will have a technique in learning, all right? In reading, for example, and thinking about what they read, in watching a film and thinking about the characters they see in the film, about the relationships between different characters, about the ideas that the characters discuss. Now, some aspects of the explanation might be remembered, but some might be forgotten. Now, making the lesson easy and simple does not instigate the mind of the student. So the role of the teacher is not to make the lesson easy, all right? Because the student has to understand that learning is difficult and that learning requires an effort, all right? So the student hears the information and understands it, but does not understand the value of the information in practical life. So the role of the teacher in this case is to help the student understand the value of information. Let me give you an example. If we are studying a history lesson, for example, if you simply give the students the details of this leader was born in the following year and he died in the following year and he did this and did this and did this and did that, these details will be forgotten. But if you show the students how this leader improved the condition of his country, what achievements this leader has done in order to change the lives of the people, all right? And so how this information is useful in practical life. This is what the students will remember. Now, in this case, if you help the student understand how the information is relevant to practical life, the receiver, the student, will take notes. What is important is that the student participates in the class discussion so that the student learns, okay? Now, you don't want the student to simply pass the exam, but to understand the world, to make use of what he learns, to apply it to his or her life, all right? So the student has to learn to take an active role in the class and then in society. Now, the third claim that Ward introduces is that the superior teacher demonstrates. Now, this teacher is superior because he or she deals with abstract ideas and tries to concretize these abstract ideas. The teacher in this case introduces theory and application. Now, let me give you an example. As a little child, I learned the multiplication table. We all learned the multiplication table. But do you think I still remember the multiplication table since I was a child? I would like to tell you that I don't, but I understand what to do in order to calculate, all right? So yes, the teacher has to help the students to learn basics, to understand the difference between to add, to multiply, to subtract, and to divide, but to also be able to do it without necessarily learning of a lot of issues by heart. Now, when the teacher introduces the abstract and the concrete, all right, for example, the idea of love, all right, that love does not mean the love between a man and a woman. Two brothers can love each other. A brother and a sister can love each other. You can love your neighbor. You can love your colleagues at work. So you can love God. You can love the prophets of God, all right? So the idea of love is an abstract idea, and the student has to learn that it does not apply only to one context, but to many contexts, all right? And the teacher in that case can have a class discussion on what foods the children love, what clothes the children love, and if they love a certain color, if they love a certain flower, if they love a certain animal, all right? So in this case, they will understand that the abstract idea of love is not only concrete in the relationship between a man and a woman. And this will become a memorable experience for the child. And then the teacher can ask the child to write a list of what the child likes or loves and a list of what the child hates, all right? And in that case, this will be an experience to remember, and the teacher will not have only told and explained, but demonstrated. The evidence the teacher provides will be memorable because the teacher will provide proof, validation, and support for what is being said. And I would like to add, the student in that case will provide proof, validation, and support from his or her life. Now, the final claim that Ward gives is the great teacher inspires. Now, this act of inspiration involves talent and devotion. This act of inspiration requires special skills on the behalf of the teacher. The teacher has to provoke the mind and the heart of the student, has to instigate the mind and the heart of the student, and introduce refreshing ideas. So if you want to teach students about plants, this is what our teachers used to do in school. They would tell us, for example, to go and put a potato in water, all right? And observe the potato. And after a few days, go back and discuss what happened to the potato in water. And do you leave the potato in the same water, or do you put fresh water every day? Now, the potato starts having roots. And then the potato starts growing leaves, all right? So this can be a very important part of the learning experience to understand how plants grow. And what is the difference between putting a potato in water and putting a potato in the soil, all right? So in that case, this will be a lesson in agriculture, in nature, and it's a lesson that will inspire some students to be interested in agriculture, for example. So the teacher has to be thought-provoking, has to provoke the mind of the students, has to invigorate them, to make them fresh, to make them active, to make them alive, and motivate them to conduct research. All right, for example, if a student likes to drink Coca-Cola, all right, so the teacher can help the students find out what is Coca-Cola made of, and what does the health of a child need, and does a healthy child need what is in a Coca-Cola bottle, all right? So the student will discover for himself that Coca-Cola is not healthy, and therefore limit the amount of Coca-Cola they drink, and maybe at some point stop drinking Coca-Cola. All right? Same thing with um, packaged food. All right? Um, so it's better to eat fresh food like tomatoes and cucumber than a pack of French fries, for example. All right. In this case, the teacher trains the student to have a voice, to conduct research, to support an argument. All right. To support the argument that eating healthy food is not good for the student. Eating healthy food is good for the student. Eating unhealthy food should be avoided. In this case, the lesson is a moment of light. All right, the lesson is a moment in which the student acquires knowledge, and it is knowledge that will not be remembered because it is knowledge that changes the mind of the student, that transforms the student to a different, better educated human being. This does not only build the student's mind, but changes his life or her life. Now, I'll give you an example. I have students and I ask them to write about a controversial character. What is a controversial character? It means a character that inspires differences in opinion. All right? So each student chose a character and they read about this character. So they read about points points written by writers who like this character or approve of this character, and others who disapprove. Now, I gave you an example of this in our lecture on Akhenaten and Nefertiti, when Naguib Mahfouz had Mary Moon talk to 14 different characters. So if you want to have an opinion about a controversial figure, you're going to read by writers who are for and who are against. And your goal is to discover for yourself whether you think this figure is a good figure or not a good figure. So you have a homework to do. Write a paragraph about a teacher and describe how this teacher is inspirational, all right? How this teacher tells, explains, demonstrates, and inspires, all right? Choose a character from history, from the world, the character of a writer, the character of a singer, the character of an actor, all right? And read about this character and then decide for yourself whether this character is good or evil, and write a paragraph to support your argument. Now, I hope you are well, and I hope you understood the point that I am trying to make. My role as a teacher is to not to make the lesson easy, but to make the lesson inspiring, all right? To lead you to want to write on your own. And in order to write, as I told you in the four first lectures, that you cannot write without reading. Stay well and take care, and I hope we meet again in person soon. Bye.